Hello and welcome to my channel. Today is the video of how I made my Necromancer Totoro, which was designed by Zach Fisher, originally worn by Jessica Negri. Yes, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about like what I'm doing at each part. It's not very formal. So right now, this is me making the breastplate. I use Warbler and craft foam 5 ugh. And I use 5mm EVA foam, not craft foam. And yes, I used brown Warbler, Finest Art, as well as black Warbler during this project. It was just a mix of whatever I had available. Why am I wearing a coat in this section? What the hell? Yeah. So I made the breastplate. I did detailing with the soldering iron, which you'll see a little bit later. This is the very first thing I did while making this cosplay, so I don't exactly remember this process. I am sorry. It's terrible of me. But however, my Warbler masks the soldering things I did, so I ended up going over it again, which you'll see with the soldering iron to fix the ugliness. I have not made a breastplate out of Warbler for a long time, so it was a bit of a hit and miss, but I think it looked alright. It was just a bit bulky. The detailing I made from some random EVA flower mats that I had, and I covered them in Warbler as well. I did more detailing with a Dremel this time instead of a soldering iron to get the raised parts, the wood grain parts, which I think worked out a lot better. But for some reason I didn't do that for the rest of the project, just for this one part of it. For this, you can kind of see that I used the craft knife just to start off the edges to make them a little bit more beveled, but I ended up going over it and dremeling. I just didn't want to be dremeling for like years. Yeah. I went over the Warbler pieces with a pen and then soldered it. I should have worn a mask. You'll see this is a very big theme in this video, is me not wearing masks when I should. I'm just really bad, but I did feel very lightheaded every time I did this, so I've learned my lesson now. Next time I'm going to. Well, I did actually towards the end. Maybe not for this cosplay, maybe for another cosplay. I don't know, but I learned my lesson eventually. But yeah, so I ended up doing the detailing of wood with the soldering iron. I think it looked alright, but the edges were a little bit raised. I tried to like sand them down and stuff, it just didn't really work. So they kind of just stayed as they are, but they look alright. Oh look, it's me sanding, yes. They look alright, I think. It's just not exactly what I was after, but I guess it's better than nothing. Yeah, so I used a lot of Warbler scraps for this project, which was really good, and to get all the like rope details, I'm not sure what I call it, around the edges, I heated up some scraps, rolled it, and then twisted it, because I didn't want it to look perfect, and I think it turned out really good. For pieces that weren't as twisted, I just used like a modelling tool to define the twists a little bit more. This is me dremeling without a mask. Good job, Alice. Yeah, so I dremeled these pieces, did the detailing as I was talking about, and then I covered them in Warbler. I quite like these pieces. I think they definitely added to like the weight of the breastplate. It's quite heavy, but it held up quite well with the attachments I did, which I don't have any videos of the attachments or anything to show you for that, but I refer to Jessica Negri's Deathwing, I think it is, video on how she did the attachments for that cosplay for this one, which was really handy for doing this. This thing was primed with about 8 to 10 coats of PVA wood glue. Not that I'm going to show you any painting because I didn't film any of that because I forgot to film things after a while. But I already filmed all this and I thought I might as well just share it anyway. So it was primed and then painted with a mixture of spray paints. I use random ones that I have sitting around, so I can't really help much on that, but if you really want to know, you can message my Facebook page or my Instagram. So, this is me making the axe. This is the second thing I did. It's basically an order of what I made, kind of. I used extruded poly foam, I think that's what it's called, but I just call it insulation foam. You can get it from Bunnings. Well, I say you can get it from Bunnings, but I haven't seen it at Bunnings in a long time, so I'm not sure what Bunnings you can get it from, but you can apparently. I'm assuming in Australia you probably can, it's just New Zealand's really bad at stocking things I like. I was very careful because I've actually got a really big scar on my leg from one time when I put a craft knife into my leg from carving this sort of foam. So make sure you're really careful when you're doing that. I'm not trying to like scare anyone. I'm just saying be careful when you're doing it because I'm careful when I do it. I beveled the edges a little bit, and then at the end, which you'll kind of see, I end up sanding everything just so it's nice and smooth. It's important to sand because you don't want like all the sharp edges from you beveling it with the craft knife. So it's me sanding it and listening to my audiobook. I think I listened to probably 10 audiobooks during this whole process. Shout out to one of the best books I've ever read, Nevernight by J. Kristoff. Because this is a cosplay book channel, I might as well talk about it. So for all the detailing on the axe head, I don't know what it's called, I think it's an axe head, I used a soldering iron. These fumes are toxic, so this is what made me feel the most sick. Yep. Still did it though. But I really like how this looked. If you're wondering how I got the proportions for everything correct, I was a Patreon of Zach Fisher for a while, and I used his templates he uploaded, all his line art. I just copied it, I printed it to scale for my size, and then made the stuff. I covered most of the pieces for the axe in Warbler because I wanted it to be sturdy and not break, and this is the best way to do it. In my opinion, in terms of making for cosplay when you have a skill level of me. This was really difficult though. If you've ever tried to cover anything large in Warbler that is an odd shape, it does take a long time. It's just all about patience and working in small sections, because if you heat up the Warbler too much while it's on the foam will start to melt, as has happened a little bit in this cosplay, not too much. So I made sure I stuck all the little curves in, all the little crevices, and then for the edges, because I wanted them to be nice and smooth and not look like they were two pieces of Warbler joined together, I used a Dremel, and it looks good now. But if you don't have a Dremel, you can actually heat up the Warbler and then use the back of some scissors and kind of press it in, and it works a little bit, as well as I imagine you can probably just use any sort of tool that won't stick to the Warbler. Yep. And so for the axe handle, the rest of the axe, I used a mixture of covering a PVC pipe in some EVA foam and doing a wood grain texture. I didn't cover this piece in Warbler because I wanted it to be comfortable to hold, as well as just in general, it's just a lot easier not to cover it in Warbler. The piece you're actually seeing right now isn't my final piece. I actually changed it because I made it too small, as you can probably tell. But it's just because I used a foam that was too thick. And then all the other pieces I made from either Warbler scraps or the same foam that I made the axe head with, or I made it from craft foam and a mix of other Warbler scraps. I just repeated myself. To make this piece curved without too much stress, I actually used a curved PVC pipe connector, which I just bought at Bunnings when I bought my PVC pipe. And my axe does split in half. It would have split in 3 places, but I just gave up after a while trying to figure out how that would work. Laziness. To make the seam not as noticeable, I used some clay foam from Lumen's Workshop that I bought while I was in Australia. It's one of my favourite things that you can see. I use it quite a lot in this cosplay, actually. It's really handy. And then once again, soldering without a mask on. Don't do it, kids. This was actually really therapeutic though, working on this cosplay, because it's just a lot of things, skills mashed together that I know how to do, but also don't know how to do. So there's a lot of making things up on the spot, which I like doing. That's how I like working. I like just making things up. Sometimes they don't look as good, so it does take me a few tries, but most of the time I get it first try, because that's just, I'm really sorry, that's just how I am. I work fast and I do things randomly. So for the detailing on the handle, I used some masking tape to mask out the thing, which I didn't actually make it wide enough, but I fixed it later. And then I used some craft foam to put around it. As you can see in 1 second, it is not wide enough. But I added some extra stuff onto it, or I recut it. Used ADOS F2, which is contact cement, to attach, and then I ended up covering it in Warbler, just because I wanted it to look a little bit nicer. But first I started bulking out the handle. It was really important for me that it looked kind of like the art they just did, and just the original art, where it kind of got thicker towards the top. So I used a lot of Warbler scraps, which I wouldn't recommend, to make it a little bit thicker as it slowly went up to the top of the axe. Used some Warbler scraps to do all the little detailing. It was fun. Burnt my fingertips a lot, but I think it looked good. And I also I just kind of looked at the reference image and created what I thought looked good. You can see how I'm kind of like heating up inside the thing. It's because if it's like small pieces of warbler, they fly away. So yeah, that's why I'm heating up inside of that sellotape. And so this is me starting working on the next part of the axe where they like join up. Yeah, so the way I did this is I got a piece of craft foam and like made it wider at the top compared to the bottom, and then I did the same thing with the warbler where I made it wider at the top compared to the bottom. You can kind of see me making it kind of fat at some parts, and then I covered that craft foam in warbler, and then I made it into a tube, and then I attached the tube onto the piece of thing I made. There you go. That's what I did. It looked a little bit ugly on the seam, but this piece was actually luckily covered in fabric, so I got to hide that. And then the piece, because I did the same for the very top part as well, which got even wider, that piece, I made sure the seam was where the pointy bits are, so it also helped me get rid of the ugliness that I made. And then the seam between the two pieces, because I didn't have any foam that was like long enough for them, and I originally planned on having it in two pieces, you'll see soon. I did some stuff to it. So this is me creating little spikes at the bottom. I used wobble scraps to create them, and then I covered them just in like a plain sheet of wool. Not a plain sheet, but like, you'll see what I mean in a second. Just to make them not look as rugged, but this is like one of my favourite parts of the whole cosplay. I think it turned out really damn good in my opinion for like someone who's not that good at like sculpting and stuff. So yeah, this is just me like covering the foam, the spikes so they don't look as rugged. But it doesn't matter if they look like too bad, because it's like, you just not even noticeable. It's like a weapon that's been used a lot, I imagine, so it looks cool. Yeah. So that was the bottom, and then I just used some wobble rolled up into balls to make little eye looking things. You can also use googly eyes for this if you want to, but I didn't, because I just used scraps that I had lying around. My goal of this cosplay was to use as many scraps as I could, because I've had a box of them for like 3 years. Some of the pieces I used in this cosplay I finally used after not touching them for 3 years. So this is what I was talking about before when I said that I like covered up the seam. Not that you can see too well, but I covered up the seam between the two craft foam pieces with just some warbler, and kind of made it look like a detail that's not actually in the reference, but I made it work. And then for the very top, I just cut out a circle out of warbler and attached it, and it's a really good stand for drinks and chips when you're at the con. Everything else was heated on and then had warbler put around the edges to make it sturdy, but it's still not sturdy enough. And this is my final axe before it was painted. Cool. Okay, so the headpiece was a nightmare. Once again, as I mentioned, I'm not good at sculpting, so I kind of put this one off a little bit. I put off all the things I wasn't excited for, but I'm glad it worked out. So I cut everything out of like floor mats from Kmart. I beveled it, I dremeled it, and then I added, not that I have any footage of it, I added some craft foam to make the like edges of the eyes and like just the bits of the mask more prominent, so that it looked nicer. And then I covered it all in warbler, and then I made warbler teeth that make it look odd. But I think it looked alright once it was painted. So yeah, so you can kind of see, even though it's behind my drink bottle, the piece where it's got clay foam on it. I used clay foam to build it up, by the way. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. I think it worked really good in the end. All the detailing was done with warbler scraps for the little ear thingies, but it needed a lot of work, in my opinion, towards the end. And then I also made teeth, I think I mentioned that already, out of warbler scraps. The way I attached this, I attached some elastic, which it wasn't very sturdy, to the edges of it. I curved it a little bit, attached elastic, and added foam on top of the elastic just so it was more comfy to wear, and it was all hot glued on. So this is for the Pauldrons. The Pauldrons I did not want to make. So this is a random part for the Pauldrons that I'm not sure why it's here in the video, not somewhere else, but it's too late for me to change it. They just go like on the arms, and I just curved them naturally, and I think they look cool. So the leg pieces were made from 5mm EVA foam that I got from Pararubber. I soldered in the detailing of the wood grain. I covered in warbler. I used the scissors to bring the more prominent wood grain, and then I did more detailing in warbler. I wasn't very like smart with my scraps here. Instead of like doing the detailing for the raised parts on the edges and like scraps completely, I used like pieces of warbler that were like still full sheets, as you can see right now, and I think it just used up a lot of it. Gave me a lot more scraps than it should have, but I wasn't thinking at the moment, and I thought I can just do whatever I want. So I wouldn't recommend that, but it does look good. It just means that, like, I think a very important part of when working with warbler is to like utilize as much of the full pieces before you have to make it into scraps as you can, because scraps are annoying. So yeah, so I quite like these pieces. They're just a little bit tight, but that's because of the strapping I did, which I'll talk about later. They just look good though. I'm proud of them. So the arm pieces had a similar sort of thing where they had the detailing, but this time the detailing was done in craft foam, or not craft foam, just thinner EVA foam. I think it was 3mm EVA foam, and then I had the thicker stuff, which was 5mm EVA foam. Soldering iron without mask again. Yep. And the detailing was glued on and then covered in warbler. I'm quite happy with these two. I think they're really good and they look really good. It's just they broke on the day a little bit. Not that anyone could notice, but I noticed enough to complain about it a few times. So I always use contact cement when attaching things to foam because it's the best, most sturdy way to attach things. And I trim around the edges just to get rid of all the excess because not everything's perfect. Cover in warbler, make it look good. And then I like curved them a little bit and attached them to each other. The reason why there's like those little triangle bits is that's where the spikes are going to go, as you'll see later, which I made like way after making these. I put those off for like the longest time. But all the matters is I finished this like way before con started, so I guess I got that going for me. So the way I made them like curved is I curved them kind of on my arm just so I knew like what would be most comfortable. The only downside is I forgot which one went on which arm. So yeah, I recommend labeling your pieces. The pauldrons I left quite late. I had to watch a lot of tutorials and watch how people did it. I had to use a lot of patterns that other people did because I don't know how to make pauldrons look good. I had some good advice though, which is thankful. I used some EVA foam, a 5mm EVA foam to make the base, which only stayed in EVA foam. It's not covered in warbler. I used a pool noodle cut in half to make the top part of it. I don't know how to describe it. That's that piece I made earlier, as you can see on the side. This was like a very much like a, I don't know how to make these, I'm just going to make them in one go, which I ended up doing, which was good. Yes, so they were very much I don't know what I'm doing. And then I did the detailing on the top part pool noodle thing with a soldering iron. Believe it or not, I am not wearing a mask in this too. The reason why I left the main part of the pauldron as EVA foam and didn't cover it in warbler is because one, I don't know how to do that without making it look ugly. And two, I felt like they were a really good weight when I was playing with them, and I'm really glad that they were like not too heavy or too sore on my shoulders. Like the worst part after the day was my legs. Yeah. The spikes were made out of craft foam, not craft foam, clay foam from Lumen's Workshop as well. And then these spikes were made out of insulation foam, which was just because I was trying to figure out how to make spikes and they looked alright, but I didn't do that for the ending spikes. The bout pieces were made from EVA foam and warbler and were cut out and made and attached, which I'll show you later. I'm not sure why this is here in the video, I apologise. I just obviously was really lazy to organise everything nicely. I really enjoyed making these because they're quite simple pieces. Yeah, but I don't seem to have any video footage of the other pieces that aren't as easy, but it's okay because they weren't very fun to make anyway, so I just want to talk about that. Sorry. Okay, so the spikes were made out of EVA foam that I got from Kmart, so it's like that stuff where it's a weird texture on the back. I made them using a tutorial from a guy, and I basically cut the two halves and then attached them together and then sanded down the part that you can't actually attach to each other. You can kind of see now that I'm like attaching the part that's normally good for the foam, and then on the other sides will be that part that no one wants. And then they were dremeled down into nicer spikes that look good and then covered in warbler. I quite like these spikes. I just put them off for a really long time because I couldn't figure out how to make them look good, and I couldn't figure out how to make them out of anything that wasn't clay foam, because I didn't want to use up all my clay foam just on this one project. It's not like the cheapest thing to buy, and I only have like one bucket of it. It's still living though. It's still got stuff in it. I've used it for a few other projects since. Also, believe it or not, I'm not wearing a mask. So the spikes were covered in a mixture of finest art and black wool, just whatever I had on hand. I was trying to use up as many scraps that were small as possible, so it was actually quite good. So some of the back of the spikes aren't actually covered, but you can't see them, so we're good. And some of the spikes had detailing where it was like cut a little bit, just so it looked a little bit more rugged, and they weren't all the same. This is the shoes. I didn't actually end up wearing them, so I'm a bit sad. I attached elastic to some strapping, glued on the strapping to the foam that I made, and then they just go around the shoe, but they only fit on one particular shoe, which is heels, and because if you don't know, I sprained my ankle really badly and it's still quite sore. I can't actually wear heels right now, and I did it like the week before Armageddon. The belt was made from faux leather and EVA foam. It was attached with ADOS F2 but needed some hot glue towards the end as it was like coming apart, and then all the other pieces were attached. The straps, you can kind of see what I did for the straps. I attached the buckles using sewing, and then I ended up like using D-rings and attaching those. If you want like a more in-depth video on the attachments, I can do that if you want. So all the fur pieces were, the leg ones and the hood were hand sewn, because I didn't want the ugliness of, what am I doing? I didn't want the ugliness of the sewing line to like show through. You know, have you ever sewn fur? Well, I'm not asking you in particular, but have you ever sewn fur, you'll know how ugly it looks when you sew like on the top side of the fur. So I hand sewed everything, which is a pain, but I think this is how it looks good and why it looks so nice. The only downside is because I only bought like a meter of the fur. So this was like $52 per meter. I bought it on sale. It cost me like $15 or something like that. It meant that I had to make the pieces for the legs a little bit less wide, but it's fine because they look good anyway. The hood was done using a pattern. I think it looks nice. And I did sew the seam together at the top, and that's just because I could. It won't show through. But then I did hand sew the lining to the outside bits, which meant it took a while. The skirt piece and also the cape was made from a brown fabric that I dipped in some black dye just to make it a little bit more grady. Not that anyone could tell, but I could tell, and it's made me happy. And then I attached some fake leaves onto it. These leaves I got from the $2 store, so they were Gucci. I liked them. And then, as you'll see in a second, I'll just start talking about it now. For the belt, I basically sanded all the parts that I wanted to attach things to on the belt, and then I used ADOS F2 to attach them. I did this because faux leather does not let anything stick to it, not even hot glue, not even ADOS F2, so it's really important that you do sand it. And also my Velcro was sewn on, not glued on, just so you know. I really like how this turned out, and I also weathered it while I was on there. I don't know why I didn't do it earlier, but I did. The piece I've got in my hand I don't actually film me making, but it's my cool weird thing. And then the fur parts were attached behind it, which I didn't film as well, sorry. Yep, cool. That is the end of the making, and here's some cool photos of me wearing my cosplay. These were taken by Pixie, not Pixie, oh my god, he's changed his name, Siren Cosmedia. He's one of my favourite photographers here in New Zealand, so he's making me look badass. It's me roaring. Me roaring was one of the hardest things we've ever done. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys all next time with another video of me doing something. Bye!